All right, you're on.
Well, I thought I'd start at the beginning before the charter happened in 1871, and just talk about a little bit of the political correlations and what was going on in this area from St. Joe. You can really say from Omaha to Kansas City, and then coming this way. Cyrus K. Holliday was one of them that I researched a lot, who was not involved in this railroad, but he was significant in the fact that he was big competition. He was the one that he lived in Lawrence. He was from Pennsylvania. He was a legal law student that decided to be an entrepreneur and go into railroad business instead because of the advice of a friend. That was in Pennsylvania, and then that would have been in the early 1850s. About in 1852 or 1854, when there was only one building in Topeka, some of these guys bunked together, and somehow the guy that founded the Rock Island Railroad, some other railroad, and then the Santa Fe Railroad was created or thought of then in about the 1852 to 1854 area. And then as the time goes by, and due to the Railroad Act that Abraham Lincoln put into effect and all that, it opened up land and stuff that would help provide financing for the right-of-ways and stuff. And so while the land was available, they were grabbing it and putting it in everywhere. And it's typically believed that this was over-tracked, and there was too many tracks here at one point, just because there was a frenzy of building, and the materials now were being made in steel mills in Pennsylvania and things like that. And Baldwin was putting out locomotives and stuff, so things were starting to get easier to obtain. So long story short, the Civil War and some hootenannies, all that kind of stuff, and a lot of the charter railroads never were built. They were just they would live on paper, and that was it. That's the only place they existed. But Leavenworth, I think, in a attempt to try to keep some competition in their area, put in the charter. They changed the name Kansas Central, but then it became the LK&W, which is a subsidiary of the Union Pacific. And so Union Pacific had a lot of this, influence right in through here. And a lot of the streets in his town are named after the founders of that railroad and the owners of the financiers. Leonard Street is the guy that chartered the railroad, kind of the big guy there. And then Scott Lucian, or Lucian Scott, I guess it is, from Lucian Street, was a bank owner from Leavenworth that helped finance it and get some bonds together. They went all the way to Onaga area in Potawatomi County to try to get funding for it, and it was voted down at one point, and this would be pre-1988 or pre-1871 by a couple, 3 years. So, there's a lot of impact with the transcontinental being built in '69, and actually the first transcontinental connection came through Kansas. I had a heck of a time trying to find it, and I thought, what do they have against us? but I did find it, and the first bridge they were waiting for forever at Omaha wasn't built yet. So they to make sure they had a connection from east to west legitimately, they trickled down from Omaha and came down into Leavenworth and crossed at Leavenworth. That was the first bridge that was available across the Missouri River. And I think that was their way of trying to increase development and stay in the mix of the financial big boys, so to speak. But geographical reasons basically made Kansas City really be the hub due to the fact that the Kansas and the Missouri came together right there. There was more opportunity for water traffic, and barge movement and stuff like that, and it just made more sense. So, after that happened, they thought, well, we're going to get us a railroad in, and our idea is to try to start with a narrow gauge and keep it cheap, and then connect at Denver with the Rio Grande Railroad, which Union Pacific ends up buying anyway. Once they started getting supplies and stuff like that, they had ordered the first 4 locomotives from Baldwin Locomotive Works, where I was trying to find a picture of, but it was the typical American style locomotive, they called it. They had the big stack up here that was going to help to keep the ashes from the wood from flying all over the place and stuff like that. It's got the cow guard on it. They call it cow guard, but I think it had more to do with buffalo guard, unfortunately. But anyway, that was their kind of a late attempt at putting something through. So they got started and started building, and one thing after another kept stopping them. Whether it was deliberate sabotage by Delaware Indian tribes and stuff like that for, reasons that, I'll go ahead and say I've seen some of the state supreme papers in the courts how they modified the treaties that they'd modified before, that, and you know, not to mention the redundancy, but the manipulation and stuff. In my opinion, only is the work of a law student that was very educated, which would be somebody like Cyrus K. Holliday. Abraham Lincoln is also associated with these railroads developments in that area, starting from probably in the 1852 to 1854 area. Abraham Lincoln was the main lawyer for the Illinois Central, the Rock Island Railroad, and the Rock Island and LaSalle. And you'll have to forgive me, there's a couple other ones, but you kind of get the point up there, you know. But so it's kind of a neat tie-in with old Abe, you know. He had a lot going. There was a lot going on from the 50s that doesn't show on you know, in the physical efforts, but material efforts, but that it developed then, and a lot of the surveying and stuff was done. So you know, these guys are coming out through here just to imagine nothing being here and finding the ideal route. As a enthusiast to try to track down all the right-of-way, I was always under the assumption they kept to the buffalo trails and stuff. And after 40 or 50 years of dabbling with this, I just found out last year that their whole idea and concept was to stay 2/3 of the way up on a hill so they could keep their bridges smaller and keep them less expensive, and less, you know, and then thus putting the line in even that much quicker. So all the times I was looking for right-of-ways, I was looking in the wrong spots until just last year in some of these places. But I'm going to work on a documentary and a video that I really want to maybe even publish, starting with Leavenworth. And it's kind of follow up on this book here. Oops, sorry. The old Leavenworth LK&W book. This was probably mid-70s, late 70s when they made this. Since the internet's come out and everything else, there's a lot of stuff that I think I can add to this, and I'm going to go through there and try to get as much preserved as possible. I found and located the only grain elevator still in existence, and one of them's in Larkenburg. It's to the north, and we were coming back from shopping, and I just happened to look up there, and there was a funny looking barn at a skewed angle, and I went, oh, you got to be kidding me. There it is, you know. So I went over there, and it was identical to the one built down here. And there's one out in a place called Lasita, which is just northwest of Leavenworth, about 4 or 5 miles. And up there on the hill, there's another grain elevator just like it. And then from there, if you go down to Miltonvale, before you get there, there's Idana is the name of the town, and there's one of them there that they're preserving. So, you know, to me, they signify, you know, not just a rusty old place for critters, but they, you know, you think about those guys that didn't have any trucks and stuff. That's how they fed their families, with these limited crops and stuff. So, to me, there's a lot of blood, sweat, and nostalgia involved in those monuments. I call them. I think they are monuments. You know, they've stood this long. Be ashamed to see all of them go down. You know, I helped haul the old one down here. I helped haul it away, and I didn't really care for the thought of doing that, but that's how it goes. You know, so. But anyway, after things keep stalling them out, the panic of 57, I think, something like that, was another thing that kind of interrupted things. But well, pre-Civil War anyway. So let me get my timelines right here. But back to 1871. So we got started, and we're moving this way. The Delaware Bridge project was not going well, so they decided to share a bridge for a while, and they kept going this way. What else was it? Something stopped it too. A depression or something else stopped the finances before they got to Holton. Right before that, maybe Larkenburg area, and there was another pause. And in 1877, it got kick-started again in Holton, and then went all the way to Garrison, which is underwater in Tunnel Creek. And I've also found that location. So I thought maybe I'd better go down there and see if there's anybody down there. You know, it's still holding their breath, but I don't know. I had to throw some kind of joke or try in there, but Garrison was named after the president of the Missouri Pacific. Strangely enough, it's when Jay Gould, one of the most hated men in the United States, happened to own this stretch of line in here for probably no more than a handshake and a passing of the baton over to the Union Pacific, which was a subsidiary at that time anyway. And that's when they started to change the name to the Leavenworth, Kansas Western Railroad. So they named that Garrison out there, and then right when it gets across the stretch where it's filled up full of water now, or where the old Blue River was, just on the west side of it, the Manhattan and Blue Valley Railroad come up through there, and that was also Union Pacific. So it crisscrossed right there, and I didn't even know that railroad existed till about 4 or 5 years ago. So it's just amazing how much, if you just keep your mind in it and just keep receptive to little bits and pieces, that they keep coming, and they keep revolutionizing, you know, what I know and what I can put together, and the connections that have occurred due to this line, you know. The thing that I value probably the most is the development of all, I think of all the development with all the families getting started, the good years of crops, you know, the hand picking and all that kind of stuff, and the satisfaction of having the family fed. Is a big value, I think, you know, and that's kind of part of where we all come from, is things like this, you know. Onaga wasn't even a town until 1878, 79, and that was due to the stall out kind of at Holton, and then 77, like I said, it got to shooting like a rocket that way, and then of course, Westmoreland, they had to have a branch down there in order to have the county seat. They have to have a line in there, so the area people pitched in and actually built that right away. It wasn't really so much the railroad, but the myth or the legend kind of goes that a lot of local people helped on that. And I've tried to find some of the right-of-way and gradings and stuff along there, and they're minimal compared to you know, a railroad that's got a whole big crew, mules, oxes, and stuff like that. And it's amazing, though. I'm taking pictures along the way and finding all the evidence I can of these bigger fills. But there is one that's pretty dominant just east of Soldier that's 30 or 40 foot tall anyway, you know, and I can't imagine those guys doing that, I mean, with hand tools, you know, and then it's just a lot of work. And then another discovery I made, I could never find out where the railroad crossed the Soldier Creek at, and exactly where it was at after I walked the creek twice, and I finally did it, and again this year, and lo and behold, there was a purlin rod that was sticking out of the bank that was smooth and about this big around with a big square nut on it that just screams pre-1900. There's only one reason I can think of it being there, and you couldn't move it. It was embedded in there, so that was probably part of an old abutment. So I think I've identified that. So from Leavenworth to Miltonville, there's only a couple, 3, 4, maybe 6 miles tops that and I'm not sure of yet, but the rest of it's pretty much been identified. Now there is one stretch, I think, for a mile or so at a place called Knox, which is just outside of the fort. And what happened is the LKW went north out of the original town of Leavenworth, and it curved over through the south side of the penitentiary. And then it went east on an old line called Knox. Well, they named it Knox after the man that owned the area where this siding was. And to make an establishment, they used an old abandoned boxcar and just stuck it there for a depot. Whereas the farmers in the area, in order to get their crops to market, they had to hand load them onto the car, or whatever car they could get there. So that'd have been you know, compared to today, you know, you push a button and wait for it to get 89,000, you stop, you know, and it's come a long ways. But those are the things I think that helped, you know, keep the evolution of, you know, of farming and stuff going, you know. But it's pretty impressive so far, I think. Of just the things you can correlate with that, you know. It was a failure and kind of ill-fated to begin with. The whole idea was to get it out there to the hey Terry, to get to the county line or the state line, and then they'd widen it and everything. Well, in 1890 they decided to standardize the track, but since they were cheapskates, and I'll say that, they tried to use the old minimized rail that was insufficient for just spreading one side. The narrow gauge was 3 foot. The standard gauge is 4 foot 8.5 inches. So they simply just wanted to widen out what the existing was, and it proved to be inadequate. In fact, it probably had something to do with the derailment of the circus train with Buffalo Bill Cody on it. There was 2 sections of that train in there, so it was coming into Havensville. I had to figure out where it went. It rolled 5 cars off the track. Well, first you have to find the topography that has an angle that can even allow something like that to happen, you know, speaking in physics kind of like that, layman terms. But I think I found that area too, so I'm kind of interested to go out there and identify that. Another tidbit I found out is that there's a local culvert here where the engine crews all signed their names and stuff while waiting to get water and fill their tender. They'd all carve their names in it. And that's actually over by you over there. I'd like to get a documentation or a rubbing of that just to, you know, see what the initials are. And Onaga was the turning point for the LKNW. So everything came east to here and turned around and went that way with our roundhouse down there. And then vice versa from Miltonville the opposite way. So this was a pretty busy little spot. And then once the cutoff came through and got built, then, you know, we were booming pretty good, I think. You know, I think it had everything to do with the prosperity that we had. You know, that maybe the additional growth that we can claim that is pretty rare. You know, one of the few towns that really have kept something together. The ones they, you know, obviously lost the railroad and they stopped it in '35, depression reasons and stuff like that. Like I said, there was never really much financing to begin with, and they really cut a lot of corners. And the downfall primarily of the whole thing was that the line could not support a grade class 1 weight requirement, which is 100 tons. It wasn't able to do that, and the bridges weren't adequate. But there are 3 or 4 locations where bridge pilings barely exist, but I thought that'd be nice to get this documented in there too. You know, there's the elements and the evidence that the clues that still exist are going away real fast. I mean, I think it's just, I found it, you know, find it pressing and determined to improve off of these guys' work, and that's basically what I'm doing. Is I'm carrying on from other people that inspired me. My dad, her father, my grandpa. He was, you know, a bridge builder for Union Pacific. So I had the coolest grandpa growing up. He had his own train. I mean, you couldn't beat it, you know. As at 5 or 6 years old, it was common for me to be 8 or 10 foot from the train going by and waving at him and not a bit scared. I thought that was pretty normal, but not so much, you know. One of the funniest things is one night my grandpa got a call on the radio asking why they were highballing the train through Marysville. And they said, "Oh, where's Chris at?" And I got up on top of the car and I had the flashlight and I was trying to highball a train through Marysville. So they said I could play all around the car, but I, you know, stay off the tracks because of obvious reasons. Unforgiving environment, to say the least. But growing up like that, you know, it never fails to amaze me the triggers that I have, the smells and stuff. Grandma Glidey kept that bunk car real clean, and you know, there was rules that went along with that. There's another car for the crew. We had our own water tank car, tool cars. So, you know, I started getting to identify some of this stuff then, which kind of led to some of the engineering experience that I ended up getting later on. It started right there by looking at his blueprints of the bridges and, you know, the one over the blue, and we went all over the place. Everywhere from North Platte, a little bit further north towards Omaha and some of that area, down south, down east, on some of the lines up the St. Joe branch, which has also been severed and put back together. Union Pacific pretty much got all Rock Island and the mop right in through there. Missouri Pacific actually was bigger than Union Pacific when they merged. And then I think the main reason was they could control the competition by just having the lines and owning them, and then abandoning the ones they didn't need. Now the St. Joe branch, when they changed that, because the river bridge, the turn bridge, which Grandpa had me on actually out there on there years and years ago. I mean, this would have been '77 maybe, that the last time that bridge was really, you know, functioning that I know of. It closed later on, but not much later. That led to, since the Union Pacific owned everything, they took bits and pieces of stuff and then made the track go back down through Atchison and cross over down there due to the fact that the bridge wasn't there. So it was probably more economical or feasible based on their clientele that they went south a little bit instead of going north a little bit. That's just a hunch, but trying to think of anything else I can think of here. Does anybody got any questions or anything? Trying to think of something funny. Thank you.
Thank you.
First